Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'll wait for stream to catch up a little bit and for more people to get here. But hello, hello. I hope you are all doing well on this fine Friday morning, afternoon, whatever. Tweet that. BBL Jamesy, let's go. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good afternoon. It's like kind of dark and gloomy here, so it does not feel like it's the morning, but it is quite early for me. I'll wait for everybody to get in here. Wait for it to build up a little bit more. Oh, interesting. Sebastian sounds. Nice, 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 nice. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good afternoon. It is Friday, so the mowing the grass guy might be here. If we're lucky, we'll get a sighting of the grass mower. It isn't 10:46 where I live. It's a few hours before that. Hi, James from Malaysia. Hi. Happy to have you here. Hello, hello. We're going to do a good one today. We are going to do a good one today. So the plan for this live is I'm going to go to that lineup thing and look at our current squad. And then we'll start to remove. We'll look at where the weaknesses are. Look at the players. I don't know why my webcam does that. Look at the players who, where we need people right away, and then talk about the names that can come in, and then look at then what sales might happen then after that. And I think that way we can build the team out pretty well. Then we'll talk about the manager. We'll talk about Carrington, some staff things, some other things, and I will answer your questions for sure. Yeah. That's what we will do. Increase the sound. Do you want me to move this closer? Hold on, give me a second. Let me move my microphone back a little bit closer for you, if that is a concern. I try to get it like out of the picture, but it seems to be better when it's like slightly in, and I can talk into this big thing with Photoshop potential. Yes, another Friday, a Friday that it may not be as eventful as we all hoped it would be, a little earlier in the week. Okay, cool. Let's see. Let me get going. I will do the intro. Prestige worldwide. What a great movie. What a great movie that is. Yes, I will have an intro, one we've done before, but I don't know that everybody got to see it because it was kind of stuck in the middle of one of the lives before, but it was certainly a very, very, very good one. Like I said, it has Photoshop potential, Blair. All right, let me get started. Let's get started. Let's get going. Okay, here we go. Gonna go to an intro now.
Someone cooked here.
I think it was actually slightly off the screen, unfortunately. Yeah. I messed that one up. I'll fix it next time. That's okay. I think that's going to be the one that we keep for moving forward. I think that's going to be the one we keep for moving forward. Yeah. I think that'll be what we keep moving forward. But I actually messed that one up. Unfortunately, it was slightly off the screen for some reason in my Streamlabs. I don't know why. Okay. Okay. Let's see. What am I missing? Are we ready? Let me make sure I've got my screen set up. Let me make sure this looks right. The cropping makes it even funnier. Maybe. That comment kills me. Oh my god. All right. Let me see what I've got here. I think this should look correct. There we go. All right. Cool. So in case any of you missed it, I liked this. I built this out last time on Lineup Builder. Good guys, good app, good website for making these kind of things. And last time we went through our whole transfer chart and then built out the targets and kind of plugged them all in. But I want to do this a little bit different to before, which is right now what I have on the screen is effectively the team as it is now, before any transfers. Yeah, there's some glitches with the Discord. This is the current team. This is no transfers. This is nobody. So this is like what we have today, following the departures of Rafael Varane, obviously as a free agent, Anthony Martial as a free agent. This is the current squad. Now, there's people who are not in here because unless I'm missing something, I couldn't fit all the names in. I might be missing something. I might have been able to do something like Ahmad / Anthony / Sancho / Greenwood. You know, that doesn't really do much for us. But we've got a bunch of players there. It's kind of a weird situation. We've got like all these forwards that we're probably not going to use. That all kind of play on the same side for the most part. And then Pellistri too. I can't forget Pellistri, unfortunately. I mean, it's kind of easy to, unfortunately, with how things have gone. But yeah, I was more looking at like who's in our team, like for real, right? Because as I understand it, let's start kind of up here. You know, as I see it, one, we know that Jadon Sancho is likely to leave, barring, you know, some major changes. Barring some major changes to his view, to the manager, to these kinds of things, we know that he is likely to leave. We also know that Mason Greenwood is extremely likely to leave. And we also know that, or at least that is my information at the moment, is that, you know, Anthony is certainly someone that is not seen as a part of the future at this point in time, not good enough. And so there would be willingness to shift him on as well. So this is where I see like is our sort of starting line right now, right? Of players that we have as it stands, okay? We've got Rasmus Højlund up front. We don't really have a backup striker. The backup striker tends to be Marcus Rashford, right? We saw that at the beginning of the year, Rashford sliding centrally. There are managers who will see him as a striker. I've mentioned this before. I know that people don't like it, but it's a reality. I think Fabrizio Romano did something, or somebody did a video or podcast yesterday, and they talked about Enrique at PSG also sees Rashford as a number 9. It just depends how you play. It depends also on your system. If you have 2 strikers, 1 striker, etc. But regardless, that's our best bet in terms of striker depth at the moment, right? Is Rasmus Højlund to Marcus Rashford. If you're going to actually play a striker or an actual forward there and not some kind of false 9. But that's the reality of it at the moment. But the problem, of course, is Rashford is also your starting left winger, and Garnacho is your starting right winger, and Garnacho is your first sub on the left. And this is not, when I look at the team right now, it's actually not that bad, right? If you had all the Duncan Castles, that's who it was. Thank you, Matt. If you had all of these players healthy, yeah, Jose did too. If you had all these players healthy, this is not a bad team right here, okay? This is not a bad team, overall. The first 11 is actually pretty good. I'm not really too down. I'm not saying it's like title winning or anything like that at all, but that's not a bad team. But you can start to see, to me, the obvious kind of holes in the team, overall, which is that one, you have no striker depth. Like if I'm looking at this right now, I'm saying Maguire and Lissandro has not been the best partnership. Where you need to upgrade your starting 11, let's talk about that. It's a maybe a pushing top 4 if it's fully healthy, but not based on the performances of Casemiro in the last year. And I'm not sure about the center back partnership. And then obviously we can't say that Shaw is going to be healthy, so that's a problem. So when I look at this, and this is where you could see the problem is at the first. The depth at center back is bad, right? The center back setup, the center back situation, I think, is where, regardless of health, you need someone, because Maguire and Lissandro together has not been the best partnership. And then the backup there's the rotations there are well below par. Victor Lindelof and Willy Kambuala. Lindelof's, moving towards the end of his time probably at United, not good enough. Kambuala is obviously young and still developing. So we need, then you can see why immediately you'd want to get like a starting center back in there, right? And then at left back, if you can't rely on Shaw's health and Malaysia's been out a year, you need somebody there. So I look at that and say, these are two major positions, a center back, a left back, pretty much right away. And then I move to the forward line. I move to the forward line and say that's obviously where there's severe weaknesses, because you've got all these extra players that are not good enough, and then the ones who are good enough, it's just the 3 rotating with each other, right? Rashford can't be the depth for Højlund, because then that means Garnacho's on the left, which means on the right, you're moving down to Ahmad, who's only had a few games and is not necessarily proven to be top level yet. So there's a serious lack of options up front that give us, where when we make substitutions, we don't downgrade, or when we're rotating, that you're not seeing a huge drop off. And then the profiles of the 3 starters, I think, is problematic as well in terms of how they play together. And then you move to the midfield. Bruno and Mount, good. Kabi Menu, when you look at that, the kind of deep pairing, you see a problem there. Kabi Menu, Eriksen, Casemiro, McTominay. I think McTominay could fit into the team, but you really need a replacement, a top level, midfielder to partner with Casemiro. You really need a top level midfielder to partner with Casemiro. Or to partner with Kabi Menu, in place of Casemiro. And then if you were to sell another, then you would need to to get another one in there. So let's kind of open this up, okay? And let's change these positions into what's sort of the reality, of things where we cannot rely on this. So let's start. Let's move here and say, we don't know that Harry Maguire is going to be that guy. Let's start the summer by saying Maguire is on the bench. How do I get rid of him? Oh, there we go. All right. Sorry. We don't know. All right. Let's say that's where one hole is in the team. A second hole is certainly here, because we can't rely on Luke Shaw's health. So that was the first team. Now we move to kind of the second team, to where we should be really looking at signings, and I'm gonna try to stop reading too much of the chat so I don't get too distracted here. So if you have questions as I get going, as usual, donate. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to ask for that, because otherwise I will get too distracted getting into this next bit. Then I think that my opinion from here is that where you have a missing the next problem, in my opinion, is in the starting 11, because I'm talking about starting 11 players here to make these holes. I don't think we have a good enough good pairing at center back. And then at left back, we can't rely on Shaw, so we need a starting level left back. Then I think this is, just bear with me on this because it takes a second. I'm going to remove this. You could argue who should be starting over here. I think that should be based on merit, right? I think that should be based on merit and form. So, but I'm leaving them as the two options, Rashford and Garnacho off the left. At the moment, I think on merit, whoever plays, on form, whoever plays. I think Rasmus Højlund is our starting striker, so we can keep him there. And Rashford or Garnacho are good enough as a starting left winger. So there's another hole. When I look at the team, those are the three areas where I see immediate problems. Now, I'm not ignoring the midfield, but yes, then the next thing becomes Casemiro, right? Casemiro very likely to leave, very likely to go, and is somebody that, we need the right partner. So let's remove him as well. I'm going to change the bench behind Kobbie Mainoo to Scott, just because. So when I look at the team, I would say if I'm building it based on where we need starting 11 players, this is where I'm starting. Okay, that's where I'm starting. There's depth, but I'm starting with these four. I didn't say it was necessarily in order, but I'm starting with these four positions where we are lacking. That's where I would say we're lacking a starting level player that we can rely on. Agree, disagree, have questions with this, tell me. But that is my view on it, where I would say we're lacking starting 11. Now, I'm not saying you can't upgrade over time, but I would say we don't have starting 11 options in all of these positions. And again, like at left wing, it's whoever's in form, Garnacho or Rashford. I think that's a great pairing for left wing. I think that's plenty. I think that's awesome. I think that's great. So we'll go to depth afterwards, right? But remember that part of the strategy here in signings, and one of the things that they'll want to do is make starting level signings, right? Because the best way to improve depth is to sign starters and push people who are presently starting into depth. You sign a starting left back instead of a depth left back, then you push Shaw into that rotation role. Well, now you have depth. It's better than signing a backup who's maybe not good enough, and then you're stressing out when they're starting. And yeah, over time, maybe that competition, messes things up, but that is what it is, and that's kind of how the game goes. Any questions before I get into the names? You say, James, there's only 3 Ten Hag signings that are starters. Yeah, that's a problem. 400 million we've spent, and this is what we can rely on next season. That's not good. That is very, very bad. That is very bad. Okay, then yeah, let's get into the starting signings, and then we'll look at the depth that we would have in there. Jasmine Saini, Matson, Todibo, Tosin, Onana, Olise. I like the way you think. I like all of those names. Yep. Let's go. So for anybody catching up, where we are at here is we've gone through the current team, and now we're going to look at where we see that there's weaknesses in the starting 11, and we've removed those positions to say that's where in the starting 11 we have weaknesses. Okay, the rest, I think we have quality starting players between the starter and the backups. So this is where I would say that the priorities would be. Now, one caveat to this is I think to sign this right winger position, you're going to have to move Sancho and Greenwood and all of that for sure. To sign here, you're going to have to probably move Casemiro, McTominay, or Eriksen. To sign here, you can sign someone. And to sign here, you can sign someone. So we're going to start in those positions. Let's start with center back. So there's a few names here, and it's kind of tricky to kind of play this all together. But this is who I right now would look at as the main two names that United are moving on. And I want to talk about kind of the way that they're moving, in the market this year. Gerard Braithwaite and Jean-Claire Todibo, okay? Just strategy-wise overall, rather than moving, say, we want this guy, let's get in talks and let's see if we can get it done, and it takes weeks and weeks and weeks, and then if we miss, we move on to the next one, and then we talk and it takes weeks and weeks and weeks, and then if we miss, we move on to the next one. Rather than doing it that way, United so far in the market, from what I can tell, have been moving a lot more like parallel. So I'll talk about more names than just these two. But right now, they've had contact with representatives of Gerard Braithwaite over the course of the last year in terms of willingness, all of that. And the situation remains that it's about the price with Everton. As we get closer to the end of June and Everton need that money, we will see if that price comes down to a reasonable level. United won't pay 70, 80 million pounds or anything like that. So that strategy remains. Now, why Braithwaite? Because Braithwaite, you could stick him right next to Martinez, okay? And you'd have a good partnership there. 2-footed, big, good in the air, all of that. Or you can put him as a rotation to Martinez and start somebody else on the right. You can do either one, and that's a good thing. But they're not going to overpay for Gerard Braithwaite. He absolutely can play both positions. I wouldn't really worry about that. They anyway. So you have a lot of flexibility there with someone like Gerard. At the same time, they're looking at Todibo. Both-footed, 2-footed. Yeah, you're right. Everybody's 2-footed, aren't they? I mean, probably if they're a footballer, they're 2-footed. The average person is probably 2-footed. Danny Braithwaite gives me Maguire vibes. Why? Because he's big in English? I don't know. Sometimes I think players get underrated at this point because of, because of their nationality. Euro Inacio. Yeah, we'll talk about Euro. But we'll talk about Euro. But at the same time, working on Todibo. Because let's say you could get both, Gerard Braithwaite and Todibo. Well, what does that allow you to do? Then you sell one of Maguire or Lindelof. You sell one of those, and then you get something like this, where you could have Braithwaite on the right with Todibo behind him, Martinez with Lindelof or Maguire on the left. Then you could swap it around. You could have, Braithwaite on the left with Todibo on the right, and, instead of Martinez. Like there's a lot of options here if you make these two signings. So that would be kind of ideal, right? That would be where I would say, ideally they get a couple of players like that. The other options that they're looking at are, of course, let's say you cannot get Braithwaite, then, oops, let me remove this and start over. Then maybe you are getting Todibo. Now, I understand that some people have concerns about how you pair up, Todibo and Martinez. But I think if you did something like this, you're probably keeping Maguire, in there as part of the team, and, swapping things around. And you have to see if there's a new manager, if there's a new play, how they like to match up their center backs, how they like to use them. But Braithwaite, Todibo, and then, yes, Lenny Yoro. So Lenny Yoro is one that United have been watching for a long time. There was obviously a lot of feeling that he'd be going to Madrid. But they've sort of been half-hearted in that. They've been half-hearted in pursuing Lenny Yoro and looking to actually finalize a kind of deal. And there was a good article. Rob Dawson talked about him yesterday, Lenny Yoro, in terms of United's interest. There's other clubs interested too, PSG, Chelsea probably. But there's an opportunity here because, sure, maybe there's a chance you could get, Todibo and Yoro in as signings as well. The first priority for United is going to be making starting level signings, and in that vein, I think they see Braithwaite, Todibo, and Yoro, and we'll work on all three of those to see if they can, to make sure they get at least one, because if they get at least one, that's good. If they get two, then that will allow them to sell, a Lindelof or a Maguire and make more space. Probably not all three. If they only get one, then I think you start going to the next tier of signings. So let's say you could only get Todibo. Then you might look at it and say, okay, could we get Tosun into the team and then let go of a Lindelof or a Maguire and or a Chalobah, for example. I think that's where Chalobah fits into this because that's a real link, in there. Is Chalobah. There is interest in him. They've been interested in him in the past, but I don't think he's in that first kind of tier bracket of players that they'd like to get in. So you could look at it and say that they for sure need one. Ideally, they can get two and sell, a Maguire or a Lindelof. Ideally, they get two from the first bracket, but maybe it's one from the first, one from the second, and then they can let somebody go. So, there's different ways that this could go, but these are a lot of the options. So I think in the starting bracket you'll have Yoro, Todibo, Braithwaite, and then in the backup you'll have more like Tosun, Chalobah. I'm sure there's other names too. Like there's been names linked that are solid, like Kilman, and other names. But the ones I'm aware of that they've been active on have been Todibo, Yoro, and Braithwaite at the moment. So yeah, that's what we have there. So let's do that. Let's say it goes really well, and we end up with let's say it goes really well. They sign two players, and we end up with something like this. Let's say like this, just as a potential. Let's say it goes something like this. Maybe it's Lindelof backing up Lissandro. Maybe it's Maguire. Don't know. But let's say it goes something like this. We'll see. Okay. Then we move on to left back. Left back's a little bit simpler. We need one player to come in. And you saw that in the last video I talked about Ait Nuri. I talked about I talked about Ait Nuri. I talked about Kirkus. I talked about Matson. There's some links to Kirkus today, so let's go with him. He's young, right? He's young. He's a good player. I wanted to read from this thing. I wonder what's going to happen if I switch over. If it's going to show things I don't want to show on my screen. So I probably won't do it. Anyway, there's a good breakdown from the account, the Football Talent Scout, about him, and he definitely, the view is kind of seeing him as definitely a bit of like a Luke Shaw's, who he made a comparison to. So I think that makes sense as a signing. He's young, could rotate for now, and I think that would be good. I think that'd be a good option. So let's say it goes well and you stick him in here, and Shaw becomes your rotation. You could start either one, and I think that you're doing pretty well there. And then you phase out Shaw over time with Harry Amos coming in. So I think that would be good. He plays at Bournemouth. I don't know what the fee would be, but maybe you're talking like 90 million for these, 100 million for these center backs together, maybe a little less euros. Maybe I think Todibo 45 million euros. Braithwaite, if they were to buy him, would have to be around 50. So maybe it's like 130 between the center backs and the left back, but you're able to sell a Maguire and raise some funds there. So yeah, that would be there. That I think this is the most realistic option. It seems good. I think Aitner is an option. I really can still think about the idea of Ian Maatsen simply because of age and the price. He's because he's got this release clause for what 30 million or something like that. Then I think you could get him at a good fee. I think you could get him at a good fee. So this is obviously like if everything goes ideal, some of the options that we could go through. But yeah, I think that's a good one there. Yeah, Maatsen is a really like an opportunity. That makes a lot of sense. Guy Fawkes, what's the most we can spend on left back in your opinion? And that's the thing, right? You don't want him to spend 50, 60 million on a left back at this point in time. But I think that will more likely happen is we get one center back, a left back, and then make sure we're lining up, sales in the center back area in order to get another one. I would say budget-wise that we probably could spend somewhere around 100 million before sales because of the departures of free agents and wages and things like that. So I think that covers this whole area with one sale of like Maguire. And then you need departures for the rest of these. But these are sort of where you can sign players without necessarily getting sales because we need them. Angie, James, do you think we sign someone for Kabi Menu's position? A 19-year-old playing 40, 50 games is risky to say the least, for sure. And we'll get to that because I think that you can kind of mix them in. Yeah, and I do think Kirkus would be expensive, and that might be a bit of an issue for sure. Yeah, if it's 20 million max for a left back, I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know, to be honest. Like, I don't know what the options are there because I think both Aitnuri and Kirkus would be more expensive. Maybe there's probably, I'm sure there's younger players out there, but that's where I would look at someone like Ian Maatsen, where maybe 25 million, something like that, would be pretty good. So let's say you make some signings around here. Let's say you make some signings in these areas, and then, getting distracted. 1 second. I know when it's happening. All right. Okay, let's move on. So, yeah, after that, you make all those sales up front. So let's say you could do all of this with the free agent departures and the sale of one center back. Let's say you could do all of that. Then over here, if you can move Sancho and you can move Greenwood, you get quite a boost financially, right? So at right wing, the obvious option, there's not even another name for me to discuss at this point in time, is Michael Olise. And then behind him, Amontiallo. Now, there are obviously other names, okay? There's Desiree Doué that has been linked, and things like that. But this would be, I think, doable, okay? If you move those on, I think this is doable. I think the interest is there. I think it's got all the signs of a transfer, but it's the type of thing that has to happen. I think there's been, decent, decent checks on all of this kind of stuff. But yeah, Doué is more of a left winger or plays more around. But I think Olise is the standout name for right wing, and I don't really have a better name for that, for anything there. So this gives you, I think, really good options here, where obviously you could still have Garnacho cover on the right as needed, but it means you can mostly have players playing in their best position, and your starting 11 starts to look really solid. And your front three is more balanced, because whether it's Garnacho or Rashford and Højlund here, it's much more balanced without three guys doing the same job. And I think that is a huge thing there. And that would be essentially covered with Greenwood and Sancho. Danny, selling Maguire and Lindelof, buying smart like Todibo, Tosin Euro allows us minimum spend over an overpriced Braithwaite. Why only sell one center back? Neither fit high line. Sure. I'm just telling you the reality of it, that Braithwaite is a target. We've seen a lot of reports on that, and he is. The one consideration that might take hold here is Lisandro Martinez hasn't been healthy for a year. You know, he started one game. What if, he's not healthy? And then you have to factor in how will he fit with, if there's a new manager, how will they view him? Because he is a more specific player. There's a lot of different things at play here, and having a signing for the left side who is fast, who is big, it's a missing link. It's something we don't have at the moment. So it's about fitting profiles as well. Maybe there's better options like Inacio, things like that. But I'm just saying, there's a lot. No, I know it's not with me. I'm just trying to explain, I can see the thinking in that, why you would want these different kind of options. Tom Godsmark, thank you for the donation. How quickly do you think we start seeing signings on the priorities? Then will we look to do some later in the window after sales? Yes, I'll kind of go over the strategy the way I understand it, but I believe that the first initial works are going to be back here, like I said, because of the departures of free agents, because they want to move forward with them. I don't think they're going to have to wait to sell to necessarily buy, but I think it's all going to work kind of in tandem. So yeah, I think that this is sort of the standout option here. If we can move on Ahmad and if we can move on Sancho and Greenwood, and yeah, the thing with Lenny Yoro is that if we can present a good project, if Madrid continue to kind of waffle around it, then the door opens. But otherwise, I don't want to put him up there yet, because if they go in for him, he will go there. And that's, always a concern. Similar to Camavinga, right? Similar to Camavinga. Now, this position, I would say, is prone to change if we were to, if something happened with Sancho. Like, if Sancho came back into the team, you have to start thinking that maybe we don't make a signing there. That's the reality of it. But I guess we will see. They said they wouldn't go for him, but then they also kind of did, and they've done this before. They've done this before with other players. They've done this so many times where they get these mixture of briefs, almost like they want the player to really push and they want to get the best fee, and then they end up getting him. I'm not saying we won't sell Sancho. I think the far more likely outcome is he leaves. I think he wants to go. I'm just saying, if we ran out of options there, and he decided he really wanted to come back, and there was a new coach, then the consideration may change around that. But yeah, I think Lenny Yoro is the best potential player, but I think the least likely out of Braithwaite, Todibo, and Yoro at the moment. So then we move to, so this would be covered by sales. This is covered by sales and the center backs. With Elise, we'd have to come in for him, and yeah, Chelsea are interested, and yes, he could go there. He could. We'll see. His brother plays for them, and obviously they're in for him before. That's going to be up to him. We're in a better position, I think, but we have to be able to offer the team, and we have to actually move for him. So that's going to be on us to do so. Let's see. Then I would say that then we move on to the midfield. The midfield is where I don't really know, if you want me to be quite honest about what we're going to get. But obviously Casemiro moves, then we want someone physical who can kind of cover ground but distribute the ball well, and all of that. And we've seen a lot of names go around. Obviously, we've seen, I think, who was I looking at? The three main names I was thinking of. Obviously, we've kind of talked about them before, but there was kind of three names I'm thinking of here. Alex King, Anthony is how a bad transfer sets you back years. Yeah, it's a problem, isn't it? It's pretty bad. Right. Okay. So I would say there's 4 names that I would discuss here, which is Holmond, Yolmond, I think is how you pronounce it, Fofana, Onana, and Yao Gomez. Okay, those are 4 names that I think are worth talking about at the moment in time. I don't know what the best fit is here, personally. Danny Collier got Manu post-final treatment next. And yeah, and I think he could come in for depth next year. Angie, a certain channel on Twitter has ruined people's opinions of English players. You don't judge if a player is fit for a high line or not based on a man who claims to know more about football than Barada. Fair enough. That is what it is. Emmanuel Ide, thank you. Couldn't Martinez be moved up in the midfield to play a CDM role? No, I don't think so, honestly. I don't think anyone's going to see him in that, just because of mobility and height too. When you're talking, Kobe Manu isn't small. He's strong, obviously, but I do think you need a bit more height in there as well. I don't know here, right? Like, there's a few options. Yeoman makes sense as a good player. You sign him and Fofana, you've got options. That would be, I think, predicated though on needing a couple of sales where you have Eriksson and Casemiro leave. Julmand, is that right? Julmand, thank you. If that's correct, thank you for that. Because I don't know. Yeah, Kobe isn't small, but it's not big. And, Rodri's big. Fabinho is big. These are bigger players. So something like this could maybe happen, right? But then Yao Gomez is an interesting target. And then Amadou Onana is an interesting target as well. So these are kind of the ways that I could see it. Hjulmand. Yeah, I know everybody keeps telling me it's different. Is it Hjulmand, whatever. That's why, anyway, that is what it is. I'm never going to get them all right. This is sort of an option. This is kind of an option, Julmand is what I'm seeing. Right, Conte wasn't big. He played big. He also had Nemanja Matic next to him a lot of the times. So there's a lot of things. But maybe you see something like this, and then you have some youth that are able to come in there. All of that as well. Yeah, Yao Gomez from Wolves is an option. So those would be some of the options that I would look in here and say this is what, this could be the team when you're looking at, kind of starting, and I don't know that you need a pure 6, in the midfield where it gets complicated is when it comes down to here. Who is your manager? Even if you have a kind of a game model and a style and a way of playing that's top down, it's questionable how you're going to see the midfield setup. There's going to be a lot of stuff. I don't know of anything advanced or in any sort of detailed discussion over, I don't know of anything detailed with that. In terms of a move on the midfield, I just know of names that we've been watching. That is one area I do not know, like who would be in the top running at this point in time. Okay, so let's say you did this. Okay, this would all be pretty much predicated on sales, free agents, things like that, kind of coming in, all of that. Yeah, so, that is what it is. What am I looking at? Yeah, you don't necessarily, right, it just depends how we're going to play. So now, if I look at this team, where's the problem, right? It's right, we can all say it, it's here, right? This is the problem. This is the next, I think this is the only problem. I'm not saying this is a perfect team, But I'm saying in terms of a problem, that's where the problem would be at striker, in terms of having a rotation for Rasmus Højlund. But when you look at all of these options, you're not going to get someone like Ivan Toney in there. One, because it's a lot of money, okay? That's a lot of money coming in there. A player who's going to want to start. Gyökeres is like 100 million, you know? So, Toney is 80 million. Šeško is very likely going to Arsenal, so you've got to look at, I think, a different type here. And so here's what I'm looking at. Morata, Guirassy, talking about like price and stuff. And then I'll just say a name simply because it solves a lot of issues. Simply because you're right, it would help. Simply because of the things recently. I'm going to put Griezmann in there because he has like a 10 million release clause. Why not sign Griezmann for 2 years? If he's got a reasonable contract, why not sign him for 2 years? Incredible player. Gives you a lot of flexibility still. Why not? Maybe he'd want to, I don't know that he would want to come. I'm just saying as an option. Yeah, I would take a player like that. Julian Jacobson, Desiree Doué. Yeah, we talked about him as maybe an option as a winger. But, the problem is, potentially wages, things like that. But Griezmann can do practically anything, Griezmann can do practically anything. So in that front line. And so that gives you a hell of a lot of flexibility. A lot of flexibility. I wouldn't pin Griezmann into saying he would be right where Bruno is because he does a lot. I mean, the guy does a lot. I would never bet that Griezmann couldn't fit himself into any team just simply because he's an incredibly intelligent footballer in terms of how he plays. Xerxes, I know people really like the idea of Xerxes. It's always been about whether he would be interested in the kind of role moving to a backup where he's not necessarily a guaranteed starter. You want, with a guy like Højlund, you want him starting not every game, but a lot of games if you want him to develop. I don't have any other links, I've just thrown those in there. I don't want to throw in a bunch of names that we don't know. But I would put those in there, Morata, like that's what I would see as a type, a Morata, a Guirassy, a Griezmann, something like that. So I think there's a lot of options. There's a lot of options there. Maybe Ben Yedder is a good option. Maybe he's not. We're not going to sign Memphis to pie back. I just don't see that working out well. But yeah, that's what I would say. I would say this is a potentially realistic kind of run through of how we move through where we started to where we've gotten to where we may end up at the end of the year. Makes sense. I mean, what do you have? Any other questions before I move off of this screen? I understand competition. I totally get it, but from a squad level, but the problem tends to be the players themselves not wanting to be in that position. I'm not talking about the theory of competition. I'm talking about the individuals and whether they want to sign for a team where they are competition. A lot of times, no. That's just the reality of it. So, Ben Yedder, you're right. Ben Yedder does have some legal issues too. That would be one I would probably avoid. Yeah, I've not heard anything about Greenwood Felix swap at this point in time. Could be true, could not. I've not heard a thing about that. Okay. All right, let's move to, I'm going to save this. I'll probably post it below the tweet afterwards to say, this is where we could be in the end. And I think it's a pretty good team. So there's our possible kind of chart where we might end up on things, where we might go. They have to move, on these players to get this done. They have started work though. One of the things I did want to discuss as it pertains to kind of the next section on the manager is that I see a lot of people talking like United cannot move in the market because of the lack of clarity on the manager situation. And I can tell you that they are moving in the market, regardless of lack of clarity on the manager situation. They are talking to people. They have been moving through these different candidates, especially in the areas we talked about, like center back and left back. But across the board, they have been working on things. Must have been Chowdhury, Rabiot an option? I don't know. I don't think so right now. Jonathan David Short, that was a good name for the backups. I meant to mention him. Yeah, Jonathan David, that's a good name. But they have been working on these things. They have been moving. The way that it's tended to go overall, just as an explanation, is obviously you have your scouts and you have all your people watching players all year and for years. Starting from January forward, they start to talk to players on like their lists, the big lists, position by position, talk to players, work out willingness situation, whether there's any chance they're going to move, if there's any sort of reasonable deal there, that whittles it down. Then as they keep kind of keeping those contacts through those months. As they get into this period, now they start talking about, hey, what are the actual demands? What are the wage fees? What is it going to cost to bring this player in? And the list gets whittled down further. And then they start actually working on the specifics of those deals and what they would entail via representatives and agents and all of that before actually contacting clubs. And that's where we're at now. And they're doing so through a lot of different they're doing so through a lot of different channels. Like they're doing so with a lot of different people. And what they have to sell to them is not, the whole kind of focus is not, that as far as I've been told, is not about, getting this, you come in to play with this manager with this plan. We did a lot of that in the past. Erik ten Hag spoke to Mason Mount to present to him how he was going to play underneath him. Now, obviously that hasn't worked out, but he's had a lot of those kinds of discussions with players in the past, but that's not really the philosophy for the summer moving forward. This is what the club is building as a whole. This is where we're going under new management, new ownership, new executive control. This is kind of the way we want to play. This is how we see you fitting into this. And that they want people to stay for the club, not for the manager. That's not an indictment of the current manager. That's the philosophy moving forward. They don't want players who won't come because X is manager or X isn't manager. That's not how they see it, And so you can, obviously a manager is going to have a say in things, but they want to sell the project to people on the basis of, they want to sell the project to people on the basis of whether they want to be a part of the team for United, not for a manager or this manager or that. Now, do you need clarity on the manager? Of course, but it's not going to take that long to do that, no matter what. One way or another, you're going to start to get clarity on the manager at some point, right? It's not going to take a month before we know who the manager is. One way or another, it's going to be, in the next maybe 7 to 10 days. That's not information. That's a throwaway. I'm saying I'm sure it'll be done within the next 7 to 10 days. Why wouldn't it be? You're probably not going to be finalizing any of these signings until then anyways, but in the moment, probably next week, right? So in the moment you line it up, in the moment you line these things up, you sell these people the way you're moving forward and say, yeah, well, of course we're going to clarify who the manager is and all of that in more detail. There's areas it could change, right? Like we talked about in the midfield, the type of midfielder they want to pair with Kobbie Mainoo is probably could change, right? Maybe the way that they see the winger could change. Maybe the way that they see Lisandro Martinez may change some of the priorities on center backs. But, those are little things that they're going to want to say in. But I don't think it has a big impact on this because they're moving forward with all of them. And I think that, they'll be ready to move on these things in the short term, in the future, and all of that. So not to worry about that. So how would I put this? So yeah, so I wouldn't worry about that aspect of the signings. They have been talking to people. I think before they make the signings, they obviously are going to need that clarity. but there's a lot of steps that go ahead of that. And if someone isn't willing to have the discussion without knowing who the manager is, or isn't willing, then that to them is probably a bit of a red flag, because it's not the focus of the discussions at this stage anyway. I think it will become more detailed as they get closer to, the end of signing these players. Again, moving on to the manager, obviously, what did we hear yesterday? That, that it wasn't going to be today. It was funny because there's a lot of people who heard it would be today. There's a lot of people that heard it would be today. And that obviously then doesn't sound like it's happening. I've seen a lot of people mentioning stuff about today. But there were reasons for that are just, that it's not like straight information. A lot of times you're looking for like almost like, it's hard to explain it, but there's circumstances that I know why people thought that, okay? And I know why, because I saw the same things and I thought maybe it will be Friday. But those are circumstances rather than information that would maybe explain things. I know that's vague. It is what it is. I can't really give you more than that. Those are just, yeah, it is what it is. So now, obviously it looks like it's going to be more next week, that the decision is sort of finalized. Now, as it were, if I thought it for sure was going to be Friday, I would have said it, but I didn't. And I didn't for a reason, because those are not things that I'm sure of. And I don't like saying things that I'm not sure of without heavily cutting it back. Like I said, I've not at this point in time heard of any information that would change where things are going. And I really doubt that anybody has, to be quite honest. I said this before on a prior live, that things about, Ineos think this person thinks that. I have serious doubts over the veracity of those things myself, based on my understanding of how Ineos operate and how things have gone over the last year. That one, that anybody knows that, or two, the way that those things are being said don't really line up with certain other pieces of information. Retro X Retro, more youth to the first team, Nice at Europa, an issue. That's obviously something they'll be resolving by Monday, but I doubt that there's an issue there. I know the manager talk is boring now, but they're like, when for example, the story about X person liking this and X person liking that, I heard that rumor on Sunday from somebody else. So let's back that up for a second, okay? If that information came out, was around a week ago or on Sunday, then if that information was around, on Sunday, then they were already talking to managers, right? In just a few days prior to that. They were already working with people in a few days prior to that. They were already looking at options, and it was very likely that Ten Hag was going to leave. So even if it were true, and I have serious doubts that it is, just for reasons, that would have been not something that changed overnight, right? It wasn't like Saturday morning they were ready to let him go, and on Sunday suddenly Jean-Claude Blanc wants to give him another year. Nobody would have heard that quickly, you see. So that would have been something that has been thought for a long time, but they were just looking at and talking to managers, and he was just likely to leave. So that piece of info it's dubious from a logical standpoint, in my opinion, and I just think there's reasons to evaluate these things and say, does that line up with everything that's gone on? Okay, and I don't like to give like people a hard time. Information is hard. What goes on is hard. I understand people are always looking for answers and looking for things to say, but sometimes things just don't add up from my perspective. And I like to. It's tricky because it's like I talk to a lot of journalists. I talk to a lot of other people at this point in time, and I don't want to attack people in any respect either, or do that, because I don't think that's necessarily fair. I don't think that's sort of correct. But at the same time, a lot of what I've said a lot of what I've done on this account with this community has also been trying to help point people in the right direction of what's true or reliable and what maybe isn't so much. And so I still feel that that's something that even outside of my info, I think that's something we've done a good job at pointing people in the right direction. And so in managers, same as ever before. Why the delay? Don't know. Who knows? I've said before that I have my doubts about the I have my doubts about, what do you call it, this whole review. If it was a review, why would it have to be delayed unless something was occurring, something was happening, all of that? Yeah, I saw the post. I understand. Like I said, Olise could go to Chelsea. They wanted him last year. He turned them down last year. I understand that comes from a Chelsea side of things as well. And it would behoove them as well to put pressure out regarding Olise. Could he go to Chelsea? For sure. Like I said, his brother plays there. Sure, maybe he would want to go back. United have to make a move to get him. If United do make their move, I think they'll get him. But if Chelsea move first and United aren't ready to, then that would be different. So, it's not, I don't think he's choosing Chelsea over us. If Chelsea make an offer and United don't, there's no choice, you see? So you have to look at that and compare up those variables, because until United make offers, the other options are on the table, and that's a reality of things. Again, all of these things are up in the air until United move forward and look to make deals. I think they're progressing on it. I'm not yet worried about it. And it's early. It's May 31st. Give it some time. We can touch on that topic in a few weeks and see if he's moved to Chelsea or not. They've been wrong before. They thought they were going to get Kieran McKenna and briefed things like that very recently. And and that's not necessarily how it works. So, yeah. You got to be a little wary sometimes of these things. Not that they're not true, but it's everything is confident in this and that until you're actually agreeing deals and making offers for everybody, including us. The other thing on the front of the managers and coaches side is, of course, that Benny McCarthy's contract is expiring, so that he's going to be moving on. As I gather, he's kind of waiting. He hasn't been given a new contract. He hasn't necessarily been 100% told that he's not going to stay. He's still waiting to see if he would get a new contract or get an extension or something like that. But as of this point in time, he's obviously on his way out. And I think there's obviously a good chance he could leave. Now, what does that mean for things? I don't know. Either way, Ten Hag stays, Ten Hag goes, they're going to want to, how would I put it? They're going to want to appoint some staff coaches, like club appointed coaches. But we need to see what happens. And, just one last point on the manager front, because I know it's so, I mentioned this, because all the debates end up talking about staying or going on the basis of this result, this reason, that reason. This is why we were shit this year, but we were good last year. This is why we were this. Those are all a factor. But a big factor that I've maintained since October of last year is still the factor of, does the manager fit flexibly? Are they able to work within the guidelines of what Ineos see as the job, right? What do they see as the game model, and what do they see as the job? And I just want to read you something, because it goes under the radar at this point with all the talk about results. Give me 1 second. I'm going to read this from David Ornstein. But it's always about results and things like that. And for me, I don't think that's necessarily the main factor. It's a factor for sure, but I think a lot of it is how you fit in and how it all works together. God, where is this? Season review, that was Tuesday. The job. One of the things I've said is that there's been concerns about whether Ten Hag is someone that they can easily get along with, that they can work together on, in terms of the job, in terms of the role, in terms of how you deal with transfers. You know, how do you do that? They don't want a manager to have a veto necessarily, right? But he has one. So what do you do with his contract? You have to restructure it to change the amount of power, influence, things like that. So there's a lot of complications. But hold on, I want to read this. Let me just find it. Shoot. I'm not finding it. Here we go. After Ineos's 27.7% stake in United was confirmed in February, Ratcliffe said it was important the club walk to the right solution, not run to the wrong one. Accordingly, United will start looking next week what areas need to improve to increase performance on the pitch. And this is the part, including Ten Hag's willingness to evolve and then decide on the best course of action. Do you understand that? Willingness to evolve. That is not thrown in there for no reason. And it's because he's been operating in an antiquated manager role from their perspective of what the coach does. Will Ten Hag accept if someone else is scheduling training? How often, how much? Because those are details he likes to control. Will Ten Hag accept a different role in terms of transfers? Will Ten Hag accept the game model that Wilcox, Barada, and such are implementing? Maybe. These are all questions we don't have the answer to, but that are key factors in this. How they work within the structure that they're putting in place is a part of fixing the structure. So sometimes when people say, you know, we give them a chance into the new structure, what does that mean? The new structure includes the manager. He's a part of the structure, right? He's an important part of the structure. And he has to fit into that structure too, or there's not a new structure. So those are questions. So my point is that the debate, I think, gets toxic because it gets into stuff about results all the time. And then people hate how we play, and some people like how we play, and then it's trophies and it's not trophies. But at the end of the day, you know, they do have to build a structure that they want. And if he wants to fit into that, he has a much better chance. I said that like 6 months ago. I said my one piece of advice to Erik ten Hag would be accept the role that's on offer if you want to have a future at the club. Accept the role that is on offer. And that's true of other managers. That's why they've ruled out other managers that they were looking at, because they wouldn't fit within that role. That same thing applies to Ten Hag. If he accepts that, then, you know, he'd have a better chance of staying. And I just think that's relevant. With regards to, you know, the physio, a long time ago, had that story about how Robin Sadler, the head of physio for United, was set to leave as part of the overhaul being led by O'Driscoll from Arsenal. Obviously, there's a story this morning from John Cross. And that United are picking up a physio from Arsenal, and that's probably to replace him. That makes sense. As a part of O'Driscoll overhauling the medical department and changing things. So cool. So that's that. Let's move on to Carrington. One little bit that I wanted to discuss, and then any more questions before I get to the end of all of this, please make sure try to drop them in soon, because we're probably only a few minutes. I'm over an hour on this already. So Carrington, and this is where I go back to this kind of point on Ineos people and what they're actually doing. Sir Dave, one of his main things has been looking at the training ground and saying, is it any good? And it looks like it's like a two-stage process of initially renovating renovating Carrington, fixing it all up, and getting it up to standards for next season, with things like that have been announced, like the warm-up areas and all of that kind of thing, and all of that. And then later on, tearing it down and putting a new one together. So there's a kind of a multi-stage situation going on there. And this is the type of stuff that guys like Sir Dave and Blanc are more focused on. Is these aspects of the business, of the infrastructure, of the commercial things, of all of that. And so that, that's going to, I think, be a big focus. Look, one way or another, where I hope, all together we can look at this and say, fix-ups to Carrington, a good transfer plan, a cohesive strategy, overhauls to the medical department. These are all pieces that come together to make a team successful. No matter who's manager next year, Ten Hag or otherwise, I think we're going to be a lot better. I think that what's important is simply that new management has the opportunity to, and obviously we have to judge based on how successful they are accomplishing this, has the opportunity to make the right decisions and put the things in place that they see for the overall of the club to make it work. And that's going to be more important than anything. So yeah, I think that's where I would stand. Any further questions, I will for sure get to them with the donation, but otherwise I'll try to read a few here before I end it. We'll go back to this. We will go back to this, just so we can look at kind of where we left off as maybe the ideal one second. Okay, yeah. Any other questions on this, where we left it off before we end here? Who would you pick out of Gerard, Todibo, Euro, and Tosin? I would pick, if I had to pick one, I would probably pick Euro. If I had to pick two, I think I'd pick Euro and Brinkley. Anselmino would be a good signing. Yeah, Anselmino would be a good signing. Yeah. I don't know much in terms of other options for right wing, to be honest. I don't know that they're going to spend money there if they can't get the best player available. I've already talked about the Elise to Chelsea thing a couple times. I talked about it when we built this too, that he could go to Chelsea. It just depends who actually makes a move. Chalobah we discussed as one of the backup options. Yep. Let me see anything else. I think I've answered most all of these guys. Honest though, I think that we will end it there. Thank you all for watching. In this one, I'm sure we will have stuff to talk about next week, maybe sooner. No, I don't think we'll have all our signings done by preseason, because you could have 5-6 players. When we look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like ideally, you get like 7 players in to fix the team, but we're not going to get all those in by preseason. But priority-wise, center back, midfielder. For me, center back, midfielder, and forward, you need him by preseason. And probably a left back, because God, Shaw's going to the Euros too. If he makes it on health wise, you may have nobody at left back. So good point. Isn't Chelsea moving quicker, showing a Glazer trait still at the club and dragging their feet? Are they moving quicker? I'm just saying, like, have they made an offer? I understand that I'm not talking about the veracity of that information. I'm sure it's correct. United have a contact with Olise as well. But are they moving quicker? Have they made an offer to the player? Have they paid the release clause? No. Well, then, until then, it's talk. I'm not saying it's false talk, but until then, it's talk. So let's wait and see, because nobody's signed anybody yet. Okay? And I will judge it based on that. We have to be quick. We have to be efficient. We have to be ruthless in a market, and we have to be decisive, more decisive than we've been. So I agree on that front. But let's not give the devil his due before it's due. I don't know how to make that saying work, but yeah. Anyway, all right. Thanks, guys. Thank you all for watching. I will see you all later. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the Champions League final, right? And then I think we'll probably get some updates by Monday and maybe even over the weekend. Okay? Talk to y'all later. Thank you very much.